So let's see. Okay. Anyway. Okay, so I griped about work. That was worthwhile. Glad to get that off my chest and yell about that. Hopefully I'm not dealing with too much of a delay. I'm looking at my list from last week. But let's see. We were going to talk about the Bitwarden Authenticator app, parting versus pre-built, and documentation for real people. And I can't remember who it was who had asked for documentation for real people, but I don't remember. But yeah, that was somebody in chat last week. I think that it was Bixby who was asking about the parting versus pre-built. So that's 4 to 5 seconds. That's not as bad. Okay, KitKats now documentation. Okay, sorry, I just clicked the pen. You don't click the pen to get the pen out. Okay. And I just did it again. So the documentation is that's the one that I forgot to talk about when we were talking about stuff last week. And that is also like complicated because it depends on what you're trying to document. So I do process documentation, which is a little bit different than like when you are annotating code or anything like that. So it sort of depends what you're looking for. When I am doing process documentation, it's very similar to, actually here, I've got a good example of it. Main page, I was on the main page, of course I was. Recipes. A recipe is basically process documentation. So I tend to go overboard, and that's actually part of why I have written the recipes here the way that I have, is like, you know, they're very, very explicit step by step. And that's specifically because I know that a lot of people who are cooking and who are taking things literally have a lot of trouble with like ambiguity in the way that like steps are described. So that's why I have written things like as explicitly as I have here, because people get scared by cooking and the possible ambiguity of it, and they're worried about fucking things up or burning things or whatever. So I try to eliminate as much of that as possible in writing recipes, and I try to eliminate all of it when I'm writing process documentation. And I think at the end of the last stream, I had talked about the making toast analogy, where, you know, I had to give a speech on how to do something, and I had to have at least 20 steps, and the thing that I gave instructions for was making toast, and I got marked down because I didn't say what direction you were supposed to put the bread when you put it into the toaster. There are tons of videos that demonstrate the same concept, like a dad having his kids tell him how to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but they don't give him explicit enough instructions, and so, you know, he puts the peanut butter and jelly on the sides of the bread and then sticks them together, you know, so it's long ways, or like, you know, he uses the knife and stabs through the bread, because leaving that room for ambiguity, you were going to find somebody who makes the choice to do whatever it was that you didn't expect them to do. So when I am doing documentation, I usually will run through the process of what I am doing, like physically, at least once. And then I will often record a video of me doing the same process. And after I've recorded the video, I will go through and, while not looking at the video, write basic steps for whatever it is that I'm working on. Then I will sometimes watch the video and compare, like, to see if there's something that I didn't even think to say out loud and skipped over. And then afterwards, after all of that, I will run through my own instructions and see if there are any steps that I potentially missed, or things that need to be further explained. And while I am doing this, if it's something on a computer, I am also taking screenshots of each step and describing the screenshot and highlighting, you know, okay, cool, whatever field it is that needs to be filled, that field gets highlighted to show somebody, like, this is what you do. I've done a little bit of this for, like, working on cars and things like that, and some, like, I put up a sheet of sewing instructions that's kind of in the same way, where it's, you know, trying to just be very explicit, demonstrating something in as simple a way as possible, with, like, very split up, tiny iterated steps. So, like it's one of those things where it's like it sounds intuitive, but there's that, there's that line, if you try to make something idiot proof, they're always going to find a way to build a better idiot. That's you're going to be shocked at the way that people will misinterpret your instructions. So documenting troubleshooting is interesting because troubleshooting is so when you're doing documentation for stuff, if you're expecting people to follow a set of instructions, what you are doing is you are trying to eradicate intuition. You are trying to get a set of instructions that is explicit enough that anybody can follow it. Anybody off the street can walk in, follow step by step by step by step to do what you need done. That is not a process that allows for troubleshooting, because troubleshooting is something that requires a lot more experience and intuition. Now, you can start troubleshooting with very little experience. Basically, the best way to start troubleshooting anything is to describe your problem and see what people say about it and see what possibilities match up with it. This is something that I do with cars. I talk about this with cars and with household repairs and things like that. Probably more than almost anything else, because a lot of issues that are problems on the computer are things that people have documented really, really extensively, but your car might sound different than somebody else's car when it's doing this. Car guides, like the teardown guides, frequently do have troubleshooting steps in them, and they're really basic little baby steps of okay, cool, drive your car and turn the wheel, and do you hear an unusual sound when you turn the wheel? Does this happen when it's doing this, that, and the other thing? Have you checked this fluid or that fluid, because that may be causing that? So, okay, how does documentation for errors and bugs work? So if you're it's also going to depend. I don't tend to do that. I don't tend to do any kind of code documentation, programming documentation. So for stuff like that, you're going to probably be better off looking up guides that people have written on almost any open source project is going to have a basic guide for how to document bugs. So LibreOffice, I think, has a beginner's guide to bug bounties and things like that. So the very frustrating thing about turning on and turning off the computer is how frequently it works. So computers are not smart machines, and sometimes they'll just get stuck doing something for no particular reason, and it's just a weird little setting or a weird little bit of code. Zoom for my office has had a problem for the last week where it's popping up a little icon for a chat that I was in a couple of weeks ago that I deleted, and the program still thinks that I'm in there, but I've removed myself, so it's just this empty icon and a chat that I can't see anymore. And I'm essentially just going to have to reinstall Zoom, because Zoom just thinks that it fucking sees it, and that's going to be the thing that fixes the problem. And it's not worthwhile to spend a ton of time digging through and finding that, because frequently what's happening is your computer is flipping out because you've got a lot of RAM being utilized from it remembering something that happened 3 days ago, 3 hours ago, whatever it is. The restart your computer thing is also frequently advised, because people are bad about how frequently they restart their computer. I'm bad about how frequently I restart my computer. If you're somebody who restarts your computer every day, restarting your computer may not be the thing that solves your problem. It may be, depending on what's causing the problem. But if you're somebody who restarts your computer every 3 weeks, yeah, that's going to make everything on your computer happier and may fix the problem that you're having. So, okay, you managed to accidentally find a way to reliably crash AutoCAD. So that I would say reach out to actually the program itself probably has the option to send crash reports, but also there's likely going to be a support forum for AutoCAD specifically, and if you found a way to reliably crash it, what I would recommend is go through and do that. And again, take screenshots as you are doing so. Document it, document what version you're on and everything like that. Like, actually, there's a very good way to figure out how to document bugs and errors and things like that. Go look at the Mozilla Firefox forums. That is where people will talk all the fucking time about how they document errors, how they reproduce errors and things like that. Like every thread on like errors and bug reporting in the Firefox forums is like pretty in depth and pretty hardcore. Same deal with the Bitwarden forums. Like I love open source nerds. We're so awful. So, but yes, Amelia Bedelia proofing your instructions. You want to pretend that your instructions are being interpreted by a malicious genie. So yeah. So the other thing is like Kit Kats now. The other thing about this, if you're teaching people who are non-technical about stuff, one of the things that people tend to freeze up around is not knowing how they can break things. So explaining, one of the things that is very helpful in documentation is explaining what doing something wrong will do. So, if you're saying, fill this field and do this, that, and the other thing, and if you fill this wrong, it's going to prevent an invoice from being generated later, say that there, because then people will know why it's important and will pay more attention to it. But if you do that because it's part of the process, and it's part of the process because it's part of the process, then it's not super duper necessary to document. So figure out what the impact of a failure in that instruction is going to be, and be as explicit as possible while also not being overly technical. So, but yeah, it's kind of the way that I always describe it when I'm talking to people at work about it. And, we use the example I always use because it makes me fucking insane is configuring a desktop. And configuring a desktop, the instructions should include everything from open the box to, how you were setting up like the BitLocker key or where you're storing the BitLocker key. Like, it's going to be a long document with a lot of steps because you ideally want like a completely untrained college student who has never touched a computer before to be able to walk in and follow your instructions step by step by step by step by step to do the thing and make it happen. And if you can also get somebody who is non-technical to like test your process, like if there's somebody who you can throw the list out and say like, hey, can you walk this through and tell me any places where you're not sure of something, that is invaluable for making sure that you've got good documentation going. And it's basically like you're asking a human to be your rubber duck because there's just stuff that you're not going to see. It's and if you don't have somebody to do this, it's the same instructions that I give for essay writing, which is read your paper to a tree, read your documentation to a living thing. It doesn't have to be a human being, and it doesn't have to be an animal, but read it out loud to something to see. Is there something that I skipped over? Are there words that are out of place? Is there something very obvious that I assumed that people would understand that isn't listed there? And what you can do with a lot of this stuff is you can front load a ton of descriptions and definitions at the beginning and then kind of assume later that people who have read the early documentation will be at least familiar with the concepts that are explained later in the documentation. So you don't need to redefine a thing every single time. It's like if you're using an abbreviation in like AP style or something like that, you state the full phrase the first time, then, parentheses, explain what the abbreviation is, and then from there on out, and I think I do this in some of my posts too, where it's like when I'm talking about password manager, first I'll say password manager, parentheses, PMW, and then through the rest of the post, I'll sort of just refer back to PMW, or, two-factor authentication. First type out two-factor authentication, and then 2FA. And if it's something that's like divided into chapters, maybe at the beginning of each chapter, you again redefine those terms. But yeah, front load that, and then you don't have to worry about putting that amount of detail throughout the rest of it. But it depends on your audience. It depends on how much you think people are going to be reading it. A lot of people just don't read the fucking manual, which is frustrating. And the other thing is to, like, if you're working on this and you're working with like a project manager or something like that, ask what the level of effort expected is. Like, at a certain point, you have to say, fuck it, ship it. get the thing done, get the thing out, documented to the best of your ability, but don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You don't want to end up, writing a map that exactly duplicates the territory. Like, it can't be too detailed, too comprehensive, or it is going to be unwieldy and unworkable. So, in some cases, that level of documentation is necessary. Flight checklists, that level of documentation is necessary, but for a lot of like softwares, it's not. But if it's a software that's working with something that's like super duper vital or like radioactive or something, yeah, okay, that's probably going to need some excessive detail. So, um, um, 379 days uptime, Linux is pretty stable. um, so yeah, talking about turning computers off. Sorry, I once again started talking and stopped reading. Yeah, it's also best to turn your computer off at the end of the day simply because your computer uses a lot of power while you're not using it, and like vampire power, ghost power, whatever it is they call it, like, uses a lot of power. We can save energy. I mean, individual energy use versus like corporate energy use is like one thing or another, but like, hey, if you're trying to reduce your battery power, fine. So, and yes, not having a battery in your laptop will force you to restart regularly. And yeah, the Bixby has a really good point for here. It's easy to assume portions of the process are natural. It's the XKCD, non-geologists only recognize, a couple of silicates and quartz, and it's like, of course, nobody recognizes those chemical formulas except for the people who are very specifically in there. So you have to ask, what is the silicate chemistry of your project? What is the thing that you can't assume the knowledge of? And it's something that is actually like a lot of people struggle with, not knowing what people don't know. Like, so it's worthwhile to also talk to the people who are going to be using the product that you're putting together, or like, some kind of audience that's close to it, and finding out what their level of knowledge is instead of assuming. So I don't know. I have no idea if that's helpful at all. So, okay, cool. That's super helpful. Yeah, there is an XKCD for everything. How often would I explain how things break? So for the like navigating to the file thing, that's the kind of thing where like you can almost think of instructions like that as like glossary terms. So early in the process, you explain, okay, so, turn on the program, navigate to a file by going blah, blah, blah. After you've explained that early on, you can assume that they know how to navigate to a file, and you can parenthetically put, like at the beginning of each chapter or subsection or whatever, if you're saying it again, navigate to the file, parentheses, see section 1A, but only even do that see section 1A the first time that you're doing it in that section. So, if you are starting section 2B and navigate to the file, see section 1A, and, then later on in 2C, you just say navigate to the file without putting the even parenthetical after that. So just to like save yourself and people time, like, it's assuming familiarity as people get deeper in the process, or like building in an expectation of familiarity so that people will start fucking acting familiar with the process. The things break, how things break. So this is, if you've ever seen a For Dummies book, this is something that I think that they do pretty well, which is they go through and like they'll have these little alert sections periodically, only explain how things break in sections that are pertinent to the thing breaking. So like, I guess you can also sometimes kind of see this in recipes. Like, if somebody is talking about making caramel and they are talking about washing down the sides of a pan, they will frequently explain, wash down the sides of the pan with a damp brush to avoid crystallization. So that to avoid crystallization is explaining how the process of making caramel can break if you don't do it properly. So doing that almost sort of parenthetical aside, or putting like a little asterisk or a little like danger symbol or something, and then just doing like a 2-sentence explainer on like the side as a sidebar, the way that dummies books do, can be very, very helpful. But only do it in the places where it is pertinent to the way that it will break. You can also, depending on the level of documentation they're expecting from you, do both like a glossary and an index. And I frequently do this when I'm writing something that's like that. This is part of what's causing my password manager book to become insane, is the amount of glossary and index work that I'm doing, because I really do want to explain in a very, very granular way for people who are non-technical, like, here's everything you could possibly want to know about password managers. So you could also, once you've got all of that information about how things break, put that in a glossary and just, refer, or not a glossary, an index, and then just say, for issues with this, that, or the other thing, see index section A or whatever. Or, kind of the same thing as the, referring back to the finding a file, or navigating to the file, like eventually, you'll just have to put, index A or index page 203 or whatever it is. But yeah, it's a lot. So, sorry, that's a, hopefully that explains some things, and is parsable. I know that's a lot. So, hello, oh, baby girl. She has arthritis in her wrists, so she's limping a little. So, because she sometimes does that when she sleeps a little bit funny. So, it really sucks when you have to be the one who breaks ground on like creating documentation that like is important to have, because there's pressure to do it right, and there's the issue that like if you are the only one doing it, you are going to be the one who creates the tradition, and to a certain extent, like it's like, again, ask people what they want from you. Don't assume that you're supposed to. Oh, sorry. Don't assume that it's supposed to be perfect. Don't assume that they want like a super, super high level of documentation on it. Like, see if you can get like clarifying guidelines before going all in, because that's also the kind of thing where it's like, maybe they're aiming this at somebody who it's like, okay, well, if they're technical or if they're non-technical enough that they need to ask these questions or need to have this explained, then they are not technical enough to be using the program. So it's also good to go in making sure that you know what your expectations are in this, not just that you want to do the best possible thing. So, the writing the technical stuff, like, it's so funny because that is, like, that's my whole deal in the hacker scene, is that people are bad at communicating technology to non-technical people, and it frequently is out of an assumption of understanding, and with computer people specifically, and specifically with InfoSec, it is frequently out of like kind of a contempt for non-technical people. And it's something that I see at work, and it's something that I see kind of widespread throughout the industry, and it's absolutely something that is like constant and persistent in InfoSec. And it's like, you can't be contemptuous of people for doing this. So I'm always trying to, there's an XKCD for everything. I am always trying to approach anytime I'm writing stuff like this as like a lucky 10,000 thing. Like, okay, cool. Like, it's fine that you don't know this. It's fine. And starting from that of like, it's fine that you don't know this. Let me explain. Let me share with you the best I can so that we can both have a good time with this. So just from like a foundational perspective, that's part of how I write about cars and things too. Because I want people to like things. I want people to enjoy things. So, hope that was helpful. I'm going to stop talking about documentation because I feel like I'm just kind of like repeating myself.